With the reveal of Dark Rey in the last Star Wars trailer, it seems that my Sith analogy may not be too far off. We'll know soon enough when the film is released. On repeated viewings of The Last Jedi, it became more and more evident that, like everyone was saying, maybe Rey wasn't a Mary Sue at all. But if she wasn't a Mary Sue, then what was she? At first I chalked it up to bad writing. Then, after considering the size of the production and the franchise itself, would a studio this big, with this many studio heads, really just let Rian Johnson throw out all of J.J. Abrams' work and seemingly make a colossal mess, if not in service of a bigger picture? What if this was all just part of the plan? Rian Johnson himself has said that he wanted to subvert expectations, yet he dished out a bland and predictable movie in The Last Jedi. But wouldn't the ultimate subversion of expectations be a female Darth Vader? Rian Johnson's film Brick had its main character using deception to infiltrate a group he would not normally be accepted into. His ultimate goal? Taking down that group. The Last Jedi opens and the Resistance are managing to hold their own while Rey is off on Luke's planet. Rey found Luke with the sole purpose of learning the last secrets of the Force, and only Luke possesses this knowledge, as he is now the keeper of the sacred Jedi texts. The Force seems to corrupt everything it touches, possibly because Luke comes from a tainted bloodline. Here we are given another clue. After Luke tosses the lightsaber, Rey goes after him and calls him Master Skywalker.
Master Skywalker?
Not Luke, but Master Skywalker. This is the way the apprentice Jedis address their trainers, as in Luke looking for Master Yoda. If Rey had no Force training, how would she even know to call him by this formal title? Luke leaves and ignores her, even though she is shielding her mind from him, or possibly had false memories implanted to avoid giving herself away. Luke still has a bad feeling about her, and as such, avoids her. Here we get several interesting clues. When Kylo Ren says he killed his father without hesitation, and Snoke says that it has ripped his soul in half, why would this be causing him so much anguish, unless the decision wasn't his own? But he was willed to do it by use of Rey's Force manipulation. Snoke seems to not understand how someone as powerful and from Vader's bloodline could be bested by a girl who never held a lightsaber before. Yes, that is a good question. If Rey was a powerful Sith Force user, it's probable she had extensive lightsaber and Force training, which would make Kylo's loss and the fight in general make much more sense. Snoke goes on to say he was hoping he would be the one to find and kill Luke, which if finding and killing Luke is the obvious Sith agenda, then Rey is right on target, as she has been since her introduction. Rey gives Luke a big speech and he sees right through it, knowing that her motivation is false. He knows he needs to stay on guard and keep the Jedi texts hidden. Rey follows Luke around the island, keeping an eye on him everywhere he goes, trying to find any clue to what she's looking for. What's in Rey's hand? While shadowing Luke, Rey has a Force-sensitive moment where she feels something in the dark, foreboding cave. Luke notices this. Inside the cave, Rey has found the books that are the secrets of the Jedi. Luke knows she has the Force and asks who she is. She says she knows the place, and an interesting exchange happens here. She says the Resistance Center. Luke knows she's lying and asks, "What's special about you?" Because he knows very well what's special about her. Again, who are you? He asks her where she's from. She says, nowhere. And he says, what we all know, nobody is from nowhere. Here, they undercut the scene with a joke to distract the viewer and keep them from getting too close to the truth, like Luke, who is suspicious of her for good reason. He then calls her Rey from nowhere and asks a third time why she's there. And a third time she answers, the Resistance sent me." This was almost identical to how she manipulated the stormtrooper in The Force Awakens into freeing her. As she starts her memorized speech again, Luke asks a fourth time, "Why are you here?" Rey's force ploy has had no effect on him, and the audience is largely unaware of this mental battle between the Jedi and the Sith. At this moment, Rey fears that she is about to be discovered and uses her standard emotional manipulation, and then confesses to having force powers and acts afraid and helpless. She then asks him to train her. This does two things. It makes Luke think that this was the secret she was hiding, and second, it puts her in a non-threatening position beneath him. She knows she can't take him and get the books in a one-on-one battle. Not yet. Rey has a beacon, and so does Leia.
How's Rey gonna find us now?
Suddenly, the First Order finds the Resistance, and everyone says it's impossible that they found them. But what if the beacon was Rey's idea, and she used it to tell Snoke's army where Leia was, and to keep them fighting, so she would be able to get the sacred texts and escape Luke's planet unnoticed? Rian Johnson then uses his distraction trick on the audience again. She says, "They tracked us through light speed," to which Finn says, "That's impossible." What if Finn was right, and Rey used the tracker to keep tabs on the ship and listen in, and then send the ship's location to Kylo Ren via the Force? Which seems feasible because after that scene, we immediately cut to Kylo, who tells his men to follow his lead. We have seen Rey use the Force and hack electronics with ease, so this seems possible. Here, Kylo Ren goes to blow up Leia's ship. He has her locked on target and knows she's there, and he feels her via the Force. At this point, Rey is with Luke, having to not use any Force powers Luke could detect and keep her facade. As such, her control over Kylo Ren wanes, and after he Force connects with Leia, his mother, he decides not to attack. Why would he mercilessly murder one parent and then suddenly let the other parent, who stands in direct opposition to him and his plans, go? Logically, he wouldn't, unless his prior action had been through Force manipulation. Leia's ship gets a hole blown in it, and she gets sucked into the cold vacuum of space. Here is a moment that on its own made no sense, but with the understanding of Rey being a Sith, it's much more clear. Leia is sucked out of the ship and is floating unconscious in space, and is presumably about to die, when suddenly she flies back into the ship, but she is in a coma.
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all!
It would be impossible for Leia, even with Force powers, to use them while unconscious and dying, as she has never been trained as a Jedi. We can plainly see Leia moving her hand, yet when she's back in the ship, she is in a coma. Also, Leia drops the transmitter, possibly as a clue as to how they were being followed, but it was picked up by Finn, who seems to completely miss the significance. Here, Rey used the Force to protect Leia and fly her back to the ship, because she knew Luke would feel her death and it would shut him down, complicating her plan. Luke is on the Millennium Falcon reminiscing about Han and his friends. Suddenly, R2-D2 wakes up and Luke understands his plea and tells him that he's not going back. The droid shows Luke an old hologram of his sister, and this has the emotional impact to make him change his mind, because he has felt that Leia is in serious trouble, so he agrees to give Rey 3 lessons at dawn. This was intentional emotional manipulation of Luke by Rey, since we have seen that she is the only other character there that can speak droid. And here we are given a great chunk of evidence. Suddenly, Rey and Kylo are Force connected. Kylo starts Force manipulating her, then quickly realizes something is wrong, and says quietly, through some reverse reverb making it hard to make out, "You're not doing this. The effort would kill you." And he's right. It was done by a third party, the Sith Master that trained Rey. Here, it is revealed that not only is Rey a Sith, but she has her own Sith Master who is also pulling strings. Kylo realizes that her surroundings are cloaked and his are not, and in typical Sith fashion, her attempt to murder Kylo wreaked havoc on the local inhabitants of the planet by blasting a hole in their house. Here she exhibits no remorse, empathy, or basic human emotion at all, simply asking, who are those things, in a world where alien life is commonplace? This demonstrates two things. One, Rey, as a high-level Sith, has most likely spent her entire life till now training and wouldn't be exposed to many alien life forms. And two, if her memory was blanked and false memories were implanted, her knowledge would be very limited and basic. Here, Rey goes into an obviously rehearsed speech about why they need Luke to come back and reform the Jedi. He asks her what she knows about the Force, and she tells him it can make people do what you want and make things float. Interesting statement, as it proves that she did use the Force knowingly on the Stormtrooper in The Force Awakens and just floated Leia back to the ship. Luke tells her that every word of that was wrong, explaining that the Force isn't a power she possesses, but is part of the world around her, a much less selfish outlook. She presses, but what is it? Possibly wanting Luke to explain the finite workings of midichlorians, but instead, he trolls her. A huge giveaway to Rey's alliance to the dark side is when Rey taps into the Force and becomes aware of the dark place under the island, and presumably is brought out of it by a shocked Luke, who tells her, "You went right for it. You didn't make an effort to resist." She tells him she saw everything but him and realizes instantly he closed himself off from it. How would someone on day one of their first lesson glean this info? Easily, if she was a well-trained Sith pretending to be a novice, or if the writing was really that bad. Kylo and Rey meet via Force link again. Kylo asks, "Why is the Force connecting us?" The obvious answer is it's the dark side of the Force joining them, because they are both Sith, and these meetings were most likely initiated by a Sith master. Kylo asks if she knows why he destroyed the temple. She won't let him speak. He then goes on to say a very telling line, "You have that look in your eyes from the forest, and you call me a monster?" Obviously, he sees the dark side in her, and it is much greater. She again calls him a monster, and he says, "Yes, I am," admitting his evil. At that moment, she realizes if he's a monster, she must be something far worse. At this point, their Force link ends, and it's so strong that water from Rey's environment has landed on Kylo. Rey jabs her staff at a rock and uses Luke's lightsaber and cuts the rock in half. The rock falls off the edge of a cliff and almost kills the alien, destroying their cart and belongings. Of course, it's played as a joke, so we don't notice how Rey almost just killed an innocent bystander, and again, she has no remorse for her actions. Back in the cave, Luke blames himself for letting Kylo turn to the dark side, but in reality, Kylo's mind was manipulated by a Sith Lord, just as Rey has been manipulating his mind.
Leia blamed Snoke.
Rey uses everything she has to convince Luke she needs him. Leia briefly wakes from her coma and Luke becomes aware something is wrong. Then Rey and Kylo force FaceTime again and neither seems to want to, confirming that this is an outside Force user connecting them. Rey pretends to be upset and vulnerable, letting Kylo once again see the false memories of her being abandoned. But the reality is, she wants to know what he did at the temple. Kylo says, "Forget the past. Kill it if you have to. It's the only way to become what you were meant to be." This is his way of indirectly telling Rey he knows that her memories are false. Rey wakes from the Force link and immediately goes to the evil Force energy under the island from her first Force vision. Here, she can use her dark Force energy and not be detected by Luke. Inside the cave, she has a vision quest, much like Luke did on Dagobah. Luke saw Darth Vader, or a symbol for evil, then after defeating him, saw his own face in the mask. Both his fear of becoming evil and a subconscious knowledge that he was Darth Vader's son. Here, Rey only sees herself, and she does not fight herself, only touches it, which reveals an infinity of rays. If the cave is evil, and the visions tend to show you your internal evil, and all Rey sees is an infinite loop of rays, it would seem to reveal that she is a powerful evil. She has a voiceover that says she wasn't afraid, but she should have been. Here we're given a huge clue about Rey and her origin. She asks to see her parents, and two figures appear, and then become a singular figure, and that figure becomes her. Much as Darth Vader was created solely from the Force and then left with foster parents on a remote desert planet, Rey was also created from the pure Force energy of her Sith Master. She was then left with her foster parents till she was old enough to begin training. Knowing that she can easily manipulate Kylo, she turns on the female charm to disarm him and win him over to her side. Keep in mind, she has repeatedly called him a monster. Luke interrupts before Rey gets a chance to put her plan into motion. She immediately attacks and tries to kill Luke, and stops only when she realizes she still needs him, and covers up the assassination attempt by pretending to be upset over the Kylo story. Here, Rey tries to convince Luke that her motivation is bringing Kylo back from the dark side, saying he's still conflicted and she saw his future. Yet she never says what that is. Also, since when has the Force given its users premonition? They both know the real outcome. Luke just doesn't realize they're on opposite sides. Rey leaves, saying that Kylo is their last hope. Whose last hope exactly? This next section is quite strange, and things are not as they appear, and it gives us several clues as to what's really going on. Rey leaves Luke's planet in the ship, and Luke goes to the hidden cave, and Yoda appears to him as a Force ghost. Luke says he's going to burn it all, including the texts. He knows in the wrong hands it'll be too powerful, and he doesn't feel right about Rey. He goes with the torch and pauses, as if stopped by some random force. Yoda then brings the fires of hell down on the tree, blowing Luke back like we saw earlier when Kylo nuked the house. Here, not only does Yoda look a little off, but he also acts strange, almost out of character, and tells Luke to quit worrying about some old books. Luke exclaims, "The sacred Jedi texts." First off, why would Yoda, a Jedi Master who died training Luke to be a Jedi, suddenly appear at this exact moment and completely dismiss the history of the Jedi as just some old books? Also, if Yoda really didn't care about the sacred Jedi texts, then why stop Luke from burning them in the first place? The next clue is when Yoda says, "The library doesn't contain anything the girl Rey doesn't already possess." The wording here is crucial. The library doesn't contain anything she doesn't already possess, because Rey has already taken the books from the library and sped off the planet. She has created a false vision of Yoda to keep Luke out of the tree long enough for her to escape undetected with the books. Yoda then proceeds to tell him things he wants to hear. This is a ploy to keep Luke from getting wise to the ruse. Yoda looks different here because this is not the real Yoda, but a vision created from Luke's memory and puppeteered by Rey. Does it make any sense that this film would go to all the expense to create huge practical sea cows for Luke to actually milk on screen, and then cheap out on something as crucial as Yoda? Rey is picked up by Ren in a sequence of events that almost exactly mirrors her getting picked up by Han Solo in the previous movie. Kylo immediately is standing over the pod as if he knew she was coming, which he must have because nobody fired on her when she entered their airspace. Rey plants more doubt into Kylo's mind by telling him she saw his future and that it wasn't clear, but you will not bow before Snoke. This, simply put, is female manipulation and mind games with a Force chaser. Kylo says he saw something too, and he knows she will stand with him, which catches Rey off guard as she wonders if he has seen through her deceptions. He says he saw who her parents are, This puts her on guard and she backs away as if clearing room for a fight that is about to happen. But before he can tell her he knows midichlorians impregnated her mother, the door opens to Snoke's chamber. For some reason, someone takes the cuffs off of Rey. This was an obvious Force manipulation, as Snoke says how strong she is immediately after they come off. Snoke then flies the lightsaber across the room to show his power in return, and punctuates it by levitating Rey across the room also. An unarmed girl with sketchy training facing off with a Sith Lord should be nervous to say the least. But Rey stares him down unflinchingly and also threatens him. Snoke confesses to being the Force matchmaker and admits he was the one Force linking them together and has been manipulating them from behind the scenes. It's at this point we can put together that not only has Rey and now Snoke been Force manipulating things, but most likely Rey's Sith Master has also been using the Force to manipulate things around Rey. Snoke Force tortures Rey, but she doesn't break. Presumably, she has been preconditioned to Force torture during her Sith training. She lets Snoke get Skywalker's information from her because she no longer needs him alive, as she already has the books. Snoke and Rey play a game of cat and mouse. The whole purpose of allowing herself to be captured was to get onto the ship and assassinate Snoke. She quickly gets Kylo's lightsaber and challenges him, knowing there is no other way to get close enough. Rey has not shown her true powers, and he has greatly underestimated her. Through Force manipulation, he tells Kylo to finish Rey. This is where Rey's Sith powers are finally out in the open. Snoke was merging with Kylo to strike down Rey. He was even lifting his sword. As Snoke called it, the blade illuminated and went through him and cut him in half. But it wasn't Kylo that caught the lightsaber. It was Rey, because she was the one that actually manipulated it from across the room. Rey has another panic moment as they face off and Kylo ignites his lightsaber, seemingly a continuation of the confrontation from the elevator. Rey expects Kylo to be angry as she has just killed his master, but Kylo now has no choice but to join Rey as the guards attack them both. It's here in this fight we get the biggest clue of all, the piece of evidence that initially put me onto the trail of Rey being a Sith. First off, her skill levels are as good, if not better than Kylo's. Together they defeat the Temple Guards, which would be arguably the best fighters the First Order has. In the fight, Rey faces off with the obvious master fighter. As we see in the fight, Kylo's Force powers allow him to know when attacks come from behind. In a move so subtle we almost don't notice it. The guard Rey is fighting has two lightsaber daggers. He puts one behind her back and she even reacts to it. Yet, a moment later, the dagger is gone and the guard now only has the second dagger remaining. Many people chalk this up to a mistake, but in a movie with a budget the size of Star Wars, coming from Disney, a multi-billion-dollar box office powerhouse, it seems highly unlikely that this scene, which was pre-visualized, choreographed, and had major visual effects added in post, would let a mistake like this just sneak by all of those eyes. No, this is the definitive proof that Rey is a Sith. Right as the lightsaber dagger was about to pierce her flesh, she used the Force to launch the dagger away. After the fight, Kylo's master is dead, his father is dead, his mother is in a coma, and he's done. He asks Rey to leave with him. Even if she actually wanted to, she couldn't because she still has a Sith Lord above her. Kylo makes her admit she knows her parents, the filthy junk traders that sold her off for drinking money. These are the foster parents that raised her after her immaculate conception. Her dark side origin being the reason her parents drank, and it was preordained that her parents would give her back to the Sith when she was old enough to start training. This could even be the actual meaning of her vision on Jakku. Money was paid to keep them quiet, and when the Empire, or possibly First Order, arrived to collect her, the foster parents were killed to keep the secret. Kylo says they are dead on Jakku in a pauper's grave, her origin almost perfectly mirroring Darth Vader's. Kylo tells her she's nothing and came from nothing. This is quite literal. If she had been created by Force energy impregnating her host mother, she quite literally would have come from nothing. At this point, Kylo practically begs Rey to join him, and then, when it looks like she will, it turns out to just be another ruse, and they fight over Luke's lightsaber until it snaps in half. Suddenly, and out of the blue, Rey shows up in the Falcon with Chewbacca, which, if she wasn't a powerful and well-trained Force user, would defy all logic. She immediately takes out 3 TIE fighters with one blast, and much like when Anakin Skywalker said,
"Now this is pod racing,"
she says,
"I like this,"
as she proceeds to fire the gun with what has to be 100% accuracy, as every shot finds its mark. This is very reminiscent of her sudden accuracy with the blaster in the previous movie. This is another part of her psychological warfare, as she uses Kylo's dead father's ship to destroy the ranks of his dead mentor. Much like Rey brought hell down on the caretakers of Luke's planet, she has done the same on a much larger scale to Kylo, and now she's rubbing it in his face and hoping to keep him agitated so his Force powers will be compromised. Chewbacca manages to fly perilously through an underground tunnel system he's never seen before and nails it. This is because Rey uses the Force to guide the ship as she has before. In another display of Force power, Rey, or possibly her Sith Master, manipulated Ross Tycho into stopping Finn from taking out the weapon. At various points, both have been ready to give everything for the cause, yet suddenly, Rose has a change of heart at the last minute. There is no romantic bond or chemistry between them to motivate this action. This was completely out of the blue. Rose then gives her ridiculous motivation in a trance-like state immediately before the First Order blasts the door. She kisses Finn in her trance-like state and then passes out as the mind control fades. Luke appears and apparently is only a Force projection. Rey lands the ship knowing exactly where the escape tunnel is and proceeds to lift the collapsed side of a mountain with more ease than even she expected. Side note, Luke bore no part in the actual escape. The Resistance escaped because they followed the Diamond Dogs out of the cave. More on this in a bit. Rey hugs Finn for appearances, and suddenly she's done a 180 from don't touch me to hugging. Or has she? This look says otherwise. Kylo is disgraced and enters the rebel base. He picks up the dice Luke gave Leia and suddenly is Force connected to Rey again. Why Rey and not Luke? They exchange knowing glances and she makes it a point to close the door ASAP. On another note, we know that Luke's appearance was a Force projection down to the dice he handed Leia not really being there. What if Rey killed Luke the night she left with the books? Possibly she slipped slow-acting poison into his blue sea cow milk. Later, the Force projection of Luke was really just Rey avoiding suspicion in Luke's death, especially from Leia, who would have felt his death through the Force. This is why Kylo Force connected with Rey when he touched the dice, and not Luke. Finn pulls a blanket out of the drawer, exposing the stolen Jedi texts. Finn covers Ross Tycho when we see that Rey is worried Finn may have recognized the books. Immediately, when Leia sits, Rey's expression changes from calculating to wide-eyed and innocent. Here, we see Leia maybe getting wise to her, but she deflects it by talking about Luke. I wasn't sure why Rey would save them or even go back to the rebellion, and then it made sense. Not only does her Sith Lord want the Jedi secrets, but he also wants to crush the rebellion once and for all. The First Order is doing quite well. Rey has the sacred Jedi texts. The Resistance has taken a major beating and lost most of its members in space and ground attacks. Han is dead. Luke is disgraced and dead. And Carrie Fisher is gone in real life, so Leia is relegated to shots of hugging Rey. The Resistance could make a miraculous recovery and win through Rey's amazing powers. Or, much like the prequels, it could all just be the last step before she herself becomes a Sith Lord. Rey then reports to her Sith Master, the universe's ultimate evil, Jar Jar Binks, who, just like Rey, is secretly the ultimate dark power hidden in an unassuming disguise.